What do the Honda E, Jaguar I-Pace, Kia EV9, EV6, EV3, Mercedes-Benz EQS and the Volkswagen ID4 have in common? Now I know that you'll say they're all EVs. Well, you know what? We are in the third episode of this series, folks, and by now you should know that stating the obvious, not my thing. So, think harder. Wow, you still don't have the answer. Well, they're all award-winning EVs. They set the benchmarks, though, in changing the meaning of design for electric vehicles. Now, these cars have really achieved breakthroughs, be it on form or function. And it did not happen overnight. No, don't worry, I am not going to take you through the history of it all. I already covered that in the first episode. What? You haven't seen it? Well, you should, because it's going to give you a lot of great context on the topic I'm getting into next. It's of course my favorite subject of all, design. I love every aspect of it, and a lot has changed in the past few decades, and that's also because of the advent of the electric car. With it, you have a change of direction when it comes to just the thought process for car designers. Electric vehicles have just made it possible for these designers to think so differently. But different did not mean outrageous, because outrageous can catch your eye. There were examples of that in episode 1 of this series, which I just referred to. Small cars, city cars, boxy shapes, aerodynamically friendly or unfriendly, and frankly just geometric shapes that one had to sit in and just kind of drive. That's also because their base was the traditional way of doing things, basing an EV on a carriage. Then the traditional 3 or 4 pillared car, and always keeping a big space or box for the battery. How batteries have evolved has also made a huge difference, because as if shrunk with a ray gun, like in Honey, I Shrunk the Battery. I digress though, because that's exactly what I want to talk about in the next episode. So let's wait for that. That's battery tech, how it shaped the future of the EV. But for now, I'd like to turn your attention back to design, because EVs of today are pretty much drop-dead gorgeous. Flush door handles, swooping roof lines, way more legroom, lots of functionality, better ride comfort, new age materials, intuitive technology interfaces. I can go on. All the cars that you just saw on the screen, they have all of that and then some, right? And that's also because the consumer wants all of that. The car's just got to be so good looking. Now, there's a little bit of a complex web of dependency here. I don't want to overcomplicate things for you. The consumer demand drives the demand, duh. But expectations like future forward tech and comfort in the cabin, that's becoming top priority. It's not just about the looks, it's also about the functionality. And of course, you want the car that's also in your garage that everybody else would love to have in theirs. So to cater to all of these demands and more, car makers like Volkswagen, Jaguar, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Kia, many more have been investing heavily into dedicated EV platforms. Now, I've spoken at length about these EV platforms in episode 2. Another one that you should be catching up on for sure. It was important to mention this because, as I said earlier, it's all interdependent. The basic platform of a car will give you the flexibility, and especially the designers, to be able to really carve out the product. Something that's much more required given how quickly trends and technology are just changing rapidly. And you know what? Electric vehicles are also now forcing design languages to change. You're seeing that effect, in fact, even on the ICE side. Brands like Nissan, Kia, Jaguar Land Rover, Maserati, so many of them have ensured that cars are now being designed to become more streamlined, more futuristic, but also really attractive. Now, I have in so many of my reviews spoken about a very technical term called coefficient of drag. Smooth flowing lines and carefully sculpted shapes. they help reduce this drag. We're talking about wind resistance. So if you look at the car right here with me, all these shapes are not just about looking good, it's also about channeling the air around the car to make sure that there isn't as much resistance to the wind, which of course makes the car streamlined, which also means, as you see here on this EV6, that it's more efficient. Now that's important when you have an electric car because battery power is really key. A lower CD figure means less resistance from the air, which means the vehicle moves faster and more efficiently, which means it's also using up less of the battery power by comparison to something that's boxy and not great. This one has a CD of 0.28. Now, you have bigger cars. That's the remarkable thing about this design story. Cars like the EV9, its own sibling, same drag coefficient figure. Now that's pretty remarkable because look at the shape of that car and this one. You wouldn't imagine that they would have a similar figure, and it all comes down to how you're streamlining the car. It doesn't matter in a way now to the designer if it's a sleek hatch, a little crossover like this one, or a big boxy SUV. It's the figure that they have to try and reach, and there are many ways to be able to get there. Design and innovation are a huge part of that. Mercedes-Benz, in fact, took a very different approach with its EQ model range. Cars like the EQS, the EQE, they actually adopted a very distinct purpose-designed aesthetic that was characterized by a sleek one bow or kind of like an egg-shaped silhouette to really optimize for extreme aerodynamics and range, something you saw very long ago from the Porsche silhouettes. This was to really visually also differentiate these cars to highlight the fact that they were electric, but they also gave you this great aerodynamic figure. Car makers are also working on active aerodynamic features, and that's what helps maybe a boxier car achieve great figures. We're talking about things like adjustable spoilers or shutters in the front grille, which can really automatically adapt to the driving conditions, which might also add to the performance and of course bring down the drag depending on what situation the car is in. These flaps will open up if the car needs cooling, but they'll stay closed to give you better aerodynamics. Now we're talking about design elements that get a lot of attention. It's not about the aerodynamics, it's about looking pretty or being very, very attractive. LEDs or LED lighting is becoming just such an integral part of car design. You can't sort of separate it from the rest of the design because it's such a part of the character. They're arguably a whole lot more beneficial when it comes to consuming less energy. They take up less space in terms of the assembly as well. And we're talking about the LED headlights, but also the beautiful sort of jewelry that you get from the daytime running lights. Now, a lot of that has also evolved over time. Now you also don't just have something that dresses up the headlamp cluster. You also get these continuous lights that go from end to end. And when nightfall arrives, it just adds a whole new element to the design of any car, and especially so of the EVs. The design of the LED DRLs has become also a signature element for brands in their design. It's part of the design identity. In fact, you can identify a car like this, the EV6 or even the EV9, in the dark just by looking at the lights. And that is what all car makers are really playing at. Now let's be honest, when you talk about LED daytime running lights, you got to give credit to Audi for really starting that trend. And Audi as a brand has really taken this to a whole new level now with matrix LEDs as far as headlamp assembly and clusters go. Another space where EVs are making strides, especially in the design department, is in the interior. Thanks to the dedicated EV platforms, car makers have a lot of room to play with. The lack of an engine and conventional drivetrain components means that engineers and interior designers can really maximize interior space for electric cars, which is why new models of late are able to really incorporate a lot of headroom, legroom, without having to drastically increase things like the roofline. Now, this leads to very sleek and dynamic cues on the outside that don't infringe on that interior space. So I am now inside an EV9 and you can see just how much more space there is. But think about this, same platform as the EV6. So EVs are really able to push the front and rear overhangs out as far as possible. You can really maximize this interior space, get lots and lots of leg room, headroom, shoulder room, you name it. Leaves space for a much flatter and larger battery pack as well. The seating is lower, or can be depending on the car. That also affects the car's center of gravity. It does wonders for the space, as I said, because you get so much flexibility. This particular one has 3 rows, for example, and you can really also have lots of design elements that get thrown in. There's either screens or the lack of physical buttons that also adds to the futuristic appeal. Now on this EV9, you also can see, besides the fact that the cabin is really large, you also up front get large screens, and there's a lot of feeling of, more modern and contemporary tech, perhaps even futuristic. It's a more horizontal dashboard, much wider viewing area. It's a big greenhouse on this one. The floor, like I said, is always flat, and the space between the wheels, 3100 millimeters. Look at the flexibility then of the platform itself. And I'm talking about a car that's just above 5 meters in length here. So lots of different permutations and combinations, lots of customization, lots of space to play with. It leaves designers a fair amount of freedom, I think, to be able to give you things like captain seats or a massage function. There is technology that can be embedded much more easily, and it becomes a part and parcel of the car and its cabin. Completely comfortable, completely dynamic depending on the application. And you can even throw in things like, of course, panoramic sunroofs and different kinds of connectivity options for your smartphone. There's lots of storage spaces as well that are possible. It just becomes more flexible, and from a designer's perspective, you're also able to use different materials, different colors, because you have just a wider amount of space to work with. Now I'll tell you what, some number of physical buttons, it's nice to get that back, and a lot of that philosophy is changing. Everything is not becoming touch or screen dependent, but don't forget, there's also voice guidance that can help you control a lot of this functionality. So it's a good blend between physical and digital. It is part of the car's interior design. And now I want to talk about one area of EV car design that maybe doesn't get talked about as much, doesn't get as much attention as it should: the alloy wheels. I'll tell you why, because the wheels are a really key area where designers can not only express their style statement, but they can actually shave off unnecessary drag as well. Now, that is very important, as you know, to the whole efficiency part of the car. Many brands are just sort of tending to blend futuristic traits with conventional multi-spoke designs, but others are embracing the aero disc movement that's inspired by some of the most successful WEC race cars. It's nice to see that come into the real world. So aero wheels, you'll get them on some cars as part of even optional equipment, because you know what, they are pretty expensive. And so I'm sure that customers are starting to embrace them, not just because they look cool and futuristic, but also because they do make that little difference to the economy of the car. And well, maybe they'll get even more streamlined, and they'll perhaps get even cheaper, and they won't be optional anymore. So as you can see, the platform needs to be flexible, the technology at par, and of course, lightweight material like ultra high strength steel, aluminum, and even carbon fiber to make EVs so much safer. So design is crucial, so integral to these cars as a whole, and so very important to most buyers. So the innovation I'm talking about isn't just about good looks. It's also about these fabulous new materials, aerodynamics, safety, engineering targets. All of that just makes it so much cooler and yet so hot, right? But there's another aspect that's also very hot. That's the battery. Not literally, no pun intended, of course, but the development is gaining supreme traction. There's lots of exciting work happening there. The race to build the ultimate battery is on, and that is what I will cover in our next episode. With all these gorgeous cars all around me, I have to say I cannot wait for the future of EVs. It's certainly going to be exciting, and a good-looking one too.